Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
My fellow Americans, I'm glad to be with you. It is Eric Erickson here. The State of the Union tonight in Washington, D.C. I will watch it so you don't have to. How about that? I'm exhausted. I've been on this whirlwind trip of Washington, D.C. with my son, and I will stay up and watch Joe Biden at war with the teleprompter so you don't have to see it for yourselves. You can be spared. I will bring you the play-by-play tomorrow and take your phone calls tomorrow because it'll be an open line Friday. And then I shall sleep. I might fall asleep in the hot tub. I'll survive. I will. You know, as an aside, I did learn something. Those of you at the Georgia Spa Company, I learned a lesson. If you stay in the hot tub for like 4 hours, your legs get itchy because you dry them out. I did learn. Listen. I last weekend, it was the weather was perfect, and I was watching. There was the Golden Knights hockey game on, and I mean it lasted forever. And then there was something else. It was like 1 something in the morning before I got out of the hot tub, and I had started like before 10. And then my legs were itching. It's like, why are they so dry? It's like, oh, I suspect probably it's not advisable to stay that long in the hot tub. But it was glorious, so peaceful. In any event, I got to move on. We got stuff to talk about. The phone number, 877-973-7425. I wish to go in the Wayback Machine. We're not going to go back that far. But I wish to go back to the precise date of my birthday in 2020. Senator Tom Cotton is a friend of mine. We tend to trade very flippant texts with each other about non-political things. But on June 3rd, 2020, he didn't even realize it was my birthday. And yet he gave me a birthday present that continues to deliver gloriousness into my life. On June 3rd, 2020, the senator from Arkansas wrote a piece in the New York Times, "Send in the Troops." In it, he wrote this: "This week, rioters have plunged many American cities into anarchy, recalling the widespread violence of the 1960s. New York City suffered the worst of the riots Monday night, as Mayor Bill de Blasio stood by while Manhattan descended into lawlessness. Bands of looters roved the streets, smashed and emptying hundreds of businesses. Some even drove exotic cars. The riots were carnivals for the thrill-seeking rich as well as other criminal elements. Outnumbered police officers, encumbered by feckless politicians, bore the brunt of the violence. In New York State, rioters ran over officers with cars on at least 3 occasions. In Las Vegas, an officer is in grave condition after being shot in the head by a rioter. In St. Louis, 4 police officers were shot as they attempted to disperse a mob throwing bricks and dumping gasoline. In a separate incident, a 77-year-old retired police captain was shot to death as he tried to stop looters from ransacking a pawn shop. "This is somebody's granddaddy," a bystander screamed at the scene. Some elites have excused this orgy of violence in the spirit of radical chic, calling it an understandable response to the wrongful death of George Floyd. Those excuses are built on a revolting moral equivalence of rioters and looters to peaceful, law-abiding protesters. A majority who seek to protest peacefully shouldn't be confused with bands of miscreants. But the rioting has nothing to do with George Floyd, whose bereaved relatives have condemned the violence. On the contrary, nihilist criminals are simply out for loot and the thrill of destruction, with cadres of left-wing radicals like Antifa infiltrating protest marches to exploit Floyd's death for their own radical purposes. And so he called for the National Guard. In these circumstances, the Insurrection Act authorizes the president to employ the military or any other means in cases of insurrection or obstruction to the laws. What happened in the aftermath of this glorious op-ed by Tom Cotton, in which 50-some-odd% of Americans agreed with him, was the meltdown of the New York Times. The New York Times editors felt compelled, after releasing Tom Cotton's op-ed, to do an editorial walkback because the progressive writers of the New York Times had a complete meltdown over it. They penned a 317-word apology. After publication, this essay met strong criticism from many readers and many Times colleagues, prompting editors to review the piece and the editing process. Based on that review, we have concluded that the essay fell short of our standards and should not have been published. The basic arguments advanced by Senator Tom Cotton, however objectionable people may find them, represent a newsworthy part of the current debate. But given the life and death importance of the topic, the senator's influential position, and the gravity of the steps he advocates, this essay should have undergone the highest level of scrutiny. They fired the head of the editorial page. They fired him. They forced out others. Adam Rubenstein was the fact checker of the piece. They made it clear to him he had no future at the New York Times. He was harassed by other employees. They slandered him in the pages of the New York Times, Adam Rubenstein, for daring to even participate in fact-checking this. Adam Rubenstein the other week wrote the piece in The Atlantic where he talked about his first week at the New York Times. He was asked what his favorite sandwich was, and when he said the spicy chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A, the HR representative told him, "We don't eat there here at the New York Times because they're anti-gay." And the progressives in the room, they started snapping their fingers at him. It's what progressives do. They start snapping their fingers to judge you and shame you. And the progressives who were in the room with him, they started doing that. Nicole Hannah-Jones and other writers came out and said, "This never happened at the Times. This is a lie. Why didn't the Atlantic fact-check this lie?" Turns out not only did they fact-check it, they had lots of corroborating witnesses. All of these people in the New York Times, the aftermath, the continuing fallout from the overreaction of the left-wing writers of the New York Times, they literally claimed that their very lives would be threatened by having Tom Cotton's words, a sitting United States senator in the majority at the time, calling for the president to send out the National Guard, as has happened repeatedly in American history. The writers of the New York Times were aghast. They were appalled. How dare we lend our pages to this? We're going to die because of it. That they really believed that Tom Cotton's very words put their lives in jeopardy, which is an admission against interest. They were some of the rioters smashing windows and looting the place. I bring all of this up because the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, who will be a guest of the president's at tonight's State of the Union, she's called out the National Guard. That's right. The governor of the state of New York has decided to call out the National Guard. And the National Guard will go to New York City, and the National Guard will get on the subways. The National Guard will protect the people of New York from the lawlessness in New York City. The National Guard in New York will do exactly as Tom Cotton said they should do, and you will note there's no outrage at the New York Times. There's no screaming and crying about it because they've seen what happens when progressive policies come to play. They've seen it now. They recognize it now. They, at the New York Times, fired people because of Tom Cotton's essay. And now the governor of New York is having to call out the National Guard because of the crime problems caused by the illegal aliens and the criminal element who are looting and robbing and mugging and picking pockets and shoplifting. Lawlessness in New York City. Lawlessness overrunning that city. So the governor's going to do what Tom Cotton said needed to be done. Tom Cotton was right. That op-ed is the gift that keeps on giving. And now I want to turn your attention to as well the Athens District Attorney in Athens, Clark County, Georgia, the lawlessness that's happening there. There's a new ad out. This ad, very similar to the ad about Lake and Riley in Athens, Clark County. Listen to this.
I love this community, but I'm deeply concerned for my children and my grandchildren. It's apparent to me that Deborah Gonzalez is more concerned about partisan politics than she is about protecting families like mine. Crime is not a red or blue issue. It's a mom and dad issue. It's a grandmother and grandfather issue.
What really hits home is when you unfortunately see your daughter's picture on the Atlanta news, because you don't ever think you're going to get that call. I had to trust the DA to get justice, and had they been prosecuted in a timely fashion, he wouldn't have been behind the wheel.
The district attorney didn't do anything.
The victims of these cases are not seeing justice because of the lack of prosecution.
The district attorney's lack of action is a direct reason why my daughter ended her own life.
Deborah Gonzalez has made this community unsafe.
As sheriff, I've lost confidence in our district attorney.
If you want justice, you better change your DA.
Yes. People are finally standing up. Americans have had enough of the lawlessness of the Democratic Party's policies, turning their back on citizens. You know, I mentioned the other day in Washington, D.C., that the Hamas-supporting Washington Post has a story about a CVS. All the shelves are empty. There's nothing left in the store. It's all been stolen. And the framing from the progressive Hamas supporters of the Washington Post is this is what late-stage capitalism looks like. No, it's not. It's what it looks like when you don't enforce the law and shoplifters are not prosecuted. It has nothing to do with capitalism and everything to do with progressivism. The progressives are allowing people to do what they do and get away with it. And guess what? The message has gone out. We can shoplift. I was in a CVS the other day in Washington, D.C. Not that one, because I had to go into one to get stuff. They had guards in the CVS. And all sorts of stuff were under lock and key. You wanted razor blades, under lock and key. You wanted condoms, under lock and key. You wanted tampons, under lock and key. You wanted saline nose spray, was not under lock and key, but the saline contact solution was under lock and key. Everything under lock and key almost. The snacks were not under lock and key. That's the primary reason I was there. My 15-year-old wanted Pringles, and so I was like, I'll go down the street and find some potato chips for you. The snacks were not under lock and key, but pretty much everything in the health section was. Tampons, condoms, toothpaste, razor blades, you name it. Baby formula, which is kind of everywhere these days. Everything under lock and key. They had multiple members of staff there just to unlock, and then they had security guards at the front in Washington, D.C. It costs you because the prices go up to cover the cost of security. This is progressive policies being played out across the national stage. It's destructive. Tom Cotton said, send out the National Guard. And the New York Times had a meltdown, and now the governor of New York is having to call out the National Guard, despite the outrage of the New York Times, because exactly as Tom Cotton said, the lawlessness will spread if you don't take action. And it has in New York City, and so now they're having to take action. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. I think my kid may be cursed. So my son, his 9th grade class trip was to Washington, D.C. My daughter's 12th grade class trip, Grand Canyon. We went to the Grand Canyon as a family 3-4 years ago. It was during all the wildfires in Nevada and in California, and there was so much smoke. We went to the Grand Canyon, drove 3 hours from Sedona to get to the Grand Canyon, and you couldn't see it. The canyon was filled with smoke. I got some okay pictures. You could kind of quasi see it, but you didn't get the expansive views like you see in the pictures. It was not that. It was so smoky. In fact, we went up. There's this horseshoe bend with the Colorado River around it. I want to take pictures, and everybody's like, there's no point. It's so smoky. You can't get a good shot. You can't even see down to the river. It's so smoky. It's like, doggone. So I got to go back. I got to go back at some point. But so my kid's there today, and during commercial break, she FaceTimed me. She says, Dad, I'm at the Grand Canyon. There's a blizzard. Literally, it is pouring down snow at the Grand Canyon right now. You cannot see the canyon. It's worse than it was when it was smoking. I'm like, Evelyn, I think you're cursed. God does not want you to see the Grand Canyon. I feel horrible. They've been in Arizona all week building up to go see the Grand Canyon, and they get up there, and there's snow everywhere. It's snowing so hard, they're having to stay together so they don't get lost in the snow. Gosh. So I'm taking them in the end of May. What she wanted for her basically her 18th birthday and her senior trip was to go to Las Vegas to go shoot machine guns. So I'm going to take them out there, and I'm going to take them in a helicopter and land inside the Grand Canyon. Hopefully we'll be able to pull off. I'm starting to think maybe I don't want to take my kid with me, or we won't be able to see anything. Poor thing. They're having a good time, and they're from the south, and it's pouring down snow. So they have built a snowman, and a guy at a restaurant came out with carrots so that they could make eyes or make noses for their snowmen. Okay. All right. I got to move on to other stuff. When we come back, we need to talk about China, some disturbing news out of China and what's happening with TikTok. First, I got to tell you about Hillsdale College and their free course you can take from Victor Davis Hanson, the famed military historian. At no charge, you go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. You can sign up for Victor Davis Hanson's series of lectures on American citizenship, its decline, and how to revitalize it in this country. Victor Davis Hanson, one of the foremost historians in the United States, he has this class you can take exclusively from Hillsdale College, and it's no charge. You just go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. You can take it at your own pace. It's a series of video lectures. It's so well done, and you can begin your relationship with Hillsdale College. Around the country, Hillsdale College builds and shapes the minds of conservative students. I broadcasted from Hillsdale on Monday. It's such a great facility. A couple of the people who worked in the speaker's office were from Hillsdale College. It's just such a great, great institution. And you can start your relationship with them with this series of lectures from Victor Davis Hanson, one of the best there is. Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. Go sign up today. ericforhillsdale.com. You will not regret it. It is so good. Hello, folks. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, very, very happy to have you. I want to go take a phone call. Pat is calling. Welcome to the show, Pat. How are you?
Oh, Eric, I'm great. Thank you. I've been listening to your recap on your trip to Washington with your children, and I'm loving it. I've been a few times, but I've never been to the Bible College, so that's a must, nor have I gotten to see the Constitution, so that's a must. Wondering if you could give me maybe 2 or 3 more recommendations. And secondly, I was wondering, is it safe for a woman to travel alone?
Okay, so I have to ask you a personal question first, Pat.
Absolutely.
How are your knees?
Good. Great.
Okay, here's what I want you to do. Call your congressman's office or congresswoman and ask to schedule a dome tour. It's the coolest thing no one knows to do. If you call your member of Congress, you can get on a list, and the dome of the Capitol is hollow, and there's a staircase on the inside of it, and it will take you all the way to the very top of the U.S. Capitol. It is the best view in the city. And on your way up the staircase, you get a history of the city because they were building the dome that you see in the Civil War. And the original glass panes are still there. And you can go up and see where the where the Union soldiers in the Civil War were graffitiing with their blades on the end of their rifles. They were scratching their names and stuff into the glass. And you can see all of this. It's wonderful. And then you get up to the very top of the Bermudes painting, and you're looking down inside the Capitol. And then you go up even more steps, and you're outside. There's a balcony at the very top of the Capitol right under the statue. And nobody knows to request that tour. Request that tour.
I will absolutely do that. I went to Gettysburg last year, and I'm still reeling from it. That was an amazing vacation. Maybe one other recommendation.
So I'm trying to think. So yeah, definitely go to Museum of the Bible. I will tell you, if you've never been, it's free, and it is my favorite of the Smithsonian museums, and it's off the beaten path, so people don't go to it. It's the National Portrait Gallery.
Oh, perfect.
If you've never, every dollar bill that you have has a painting of one of the presidents on it, and the original is in that portrait gallery. My favorite painting in the world is in the portrait gallery. It's this massive painting called the Sierra Nevadas. You can't miss it. It is gorgeous. But not only that, it's also the American Arts and Crafts Museum. And so when you're winding around, you stumble upon, my wife loves to quilt. They have these incredible quilts that go back to the 1600s. They have all the paintings of the presidents. They have the original paintings of some of the, not just the presidents, but the founding fathers. They have the original painting of Ulysses S. Grant and of Sherman, of Jefferson Davis, of Benjamin Franklin. You name it, they're all in there. And it is just the most fabulous museum no one ever goes to.
Well, I think that will take care of my trip. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that you enjoyed it with your children, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate that. Yeah, listen, y'all, I'm telling you, it is okay, we're off the beaten path now. I blame Pat. It's okay. I know as a conservative you're not supposed to like Washington, D.C., but y'all, I have been around the world. I have been to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is neat. Well, it was before the commies took it over. I went to Hong Kong when it was still a British colony. But I've been all over Europe, and I love Europe. I've been to Paris. I've been to Rome. I've been to London. I've been to Berlin. I've been to Munich. I've been to Frankfurt. I've been to Brussels. I've been to Amsterdam. I've been to Stockholm. I've been to Geneva. I've been to Europe. I've been to Zurich. I've been to Istanbul. I've been to Athens. I've been all over the world. When I was a kid, the place that I couldn't go was Washington, D.C., because I lived halfway around the world. So we go to Europe, we go to Africa, we go to Asia very easily. Couldn't go to the United States very easily. And I desperately wanted to go to Washington, D.C. After all, as an American, it's my capital. And so I memorized the streets and the subway system in D.C. to convince my parents I could be a tour guide. And as I was older, I finally realized, you know what? Of course, there was no way. I mean, it was literally like halfway around the world from where we lived. So when I was 18 years old, my sister married a sailor in the Navy. They lived in Norfolk, Virginia. My sister and her husband took me to D.C. for the first time. And then I started going by myself when I was in college. I went up to Washington, D.C. I'd save my money and I would go. And I love Washington, D.C. I do. I love that city. I don't like the politics, and there is crime. And Pat, you should know the daytime in like the touristy areas, they've upped the police. I asked the driver when we got there on Sunday night how safe it was, and he said the areas you go, it's not bad. They've upped the number of police because of the tourist season. Take an Uber, don't take a cab, don't take the subway. He said take an Uber, don't take Lyft, take Uber. Tend to get the black sedans. You're not going to get carjacked. You're going to be okay in the northwest areas of the city. But y'all, I have been there. And, when I was a kid growing up before 9/11, it's hard for people post 9/11 to remember this, or if you're younger than me, to understand that you could walk inside. You could just walk into the Capitol. That you had a magnetometer, you walk inside the Capitol, and you could roam around to your heart's content. There was no security. You literally could walk all over the U.S. Capitol by yourself. And they had guards outside the doors you weren't supposed to get into, but free range. Walk on the mall. Go to the museums. Pat, if you're still listening, if you can make it out to Dulles, to the Air and Space Museum's extension, that's out there, and it's incredible. It's the extension of the Air and Space Museum. The Air and Space Museum, we toured it on Tuesday, and half of it was under reconstruction. So, for example, the Spirit of St. Louis is in there. Charles Lindbergh's plane, and you couldn't see it. And then there's a moon rock you can touch, and you couldn't see it. But you know what's in there? Y'all, my son has developed a passion for flying because of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and he is desperate to get his pilot's license. The original, it is not a reproduction. It is the original Wright brothers plane is in the Air and Space Museum. It is you can see it for yourself. It's incredible. The Apollo 11 capsule is in this museum. It's America's trophy room is the Smithsonian Institute. And I love the art museums. The National Portrait Gallery is my absolute favorite Smithsonian museum. But I love that city. And now, is it deteriorating? Yes. The progressive policies of the city are killing it. They're really genuinely favorite restaurants of mine are no longer there. They're gone. The buildings are empty. And it's sad to see there were so many good restaurants I wanted to take my son to. My favorite pizza place in D.C. just shut down abruptly one day. Pie Pizzeria is just gone. And it's sad to see, but I will tell you, when I was in college and law school, there's this dive bar called Hawk and Dove. Y'all, it was I love dive bars. Genuinely, I love to go find a dive bar. And the reason I like to find a dive bar is, one, the beer is cold and cheap, and two, everybody is your friend in a dive bar. Everybody's there, and they're just there to enjoy themselves, and there's no aristocracy. It's a meritocracy, and they're great. They're dingy, dark beer halls, and I love them. And one of the best was Hawk and Dove. And if you're my age or older, the Hawk and Dove is where you went when you went to Capitol Hill to see your friends, and you stayed up all night, and the beer was cheap, and if you were underage, it didn't matter, and you had a blast. And I went in there with my son and was prepared for my shoes to stick to the floor. And y'all, it's like this gourmet restaurant now, and it broke my heart. There's light. You can actually see each other in there. And there's no music. You can actually have a conversation. It was horrifying. And they have IPAs, fancy IPAs, and not just Miller Lite. And I was like, oh, it kills me that this place the food was not bad. Got a great chicken pot pie, but it was not a dive bar anymore. I need to move on. It's Pat's problem. If y'all ever go to Washington, though, in all seriousness, if you go to Washington, you call your congressman and ask for a dome tour. You have just dereliction of duty if you do not ask for a dome tour. It is the coolest thing you can do in Washington, D.C. Forget going up in the Washington Monument. Go up on top of the Capitol Dome. So few people ever do it. All right. Back to the phones. Ty, you are up next. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Eric. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I don't really think I have a question in here. I just want to comment on two earlier stories and just juxtapose those to each other. One regarding the post-war statue that needs to be removed because it was a non-consensual act. And then right within minutes, you talked about the crazy progressive left who now wants to make pedophilia is
yes.
now a sexual orientation. how, if that is a non-consensual act with the statue, how I have to say at least 98% of those children who are being preyed upon by these pedophiles are not consenting to that act.
I agree. And not only that, but the age of consent is like 16 years old. It's totally bizarre.
Well, I'm glad that you agree with me. I know that you do. And like I said, there was no question in there.
No, listen, I understand. Sometimes it's in your brain and you got to just get it out. I got you. They have truly, genuinely lost their minds, Ty. People think I'm making this up. No, this was a TED Talk to explain that pedophilia is actually a sexual orientation and we should get over our qualms about it and just mainstream. No. These people have lost their minds. JR calling from Dayton, Ohio. Welcome to the show. JR? Well, JR from Dayton was there, and now he's gone. I don't know what happened to JR. He was calling from Dayton. WHIO, by the way, I guess I should say one more time, if you're on KR, listening to KRMG in Tulsa or WHIO in Dayton or WOKV in Jacksonville, Florida, yes, your radio station has put me on live now. If you got complaints, well, call them. I hope you don't, though. It's nice to be with you. Now, I got other stuff I got to talk about. I've been talking to you about China. And listen, one of the things, if you've heard, having grown up overseas, I am vastly interested in foreign issues as well, because growing up overseas, I know what it was like to be an American abroad and how American leadership around the world is a necessary thing and how the Chinese covet leadership of the world. And they have released statements in China, a couple of them, one of which they're not putting in print. They're allowing people to read it in government, but they're not putting it in print. And the Wall Street Journal has an exclusive on it, that the Chinese are essentially ordering by 2027, every American software product has to be out of Chinese facilities. No Chinese business in or out of government will be allowed to operate using American software. So, for example, think of Salesforce, the customer management system by the progressive guy that owns Time Magazine. They want it gone. No more. You're not allowed to use it. No American software to be used in China after 2027. At the same time, the Chinese are no longer allowing the prime minister of China to give briefings on the economy, which is a telling sign. They're insisting that China's economy is growing at 5% per year and that it's been at 5% per year. And everyone on the outside knows China's government and economy are collapsing. Now, I have to say that to make a point here. There's a growing movement of conservatives in this country who have taken the position that we will not believe anything the government tells us unless we're in charge of it. So the economic data comes out of Washington, D.C., comes out of the administration. Like, well, it's Biden. He could be lying. Here's the thing you have to understand to understand why they can quibble with it and fudge it a little bit, but not much, because the United States has private sector data, not just public sector data. So the corporations of America, honestly, and ADP kind of leads the way with its hiring data. It gives its reports. They can bring out their private sector data, and it tends to correspond with the public sector data. And the only time you have to worry about Washington cooking the books is when the public sector data doesn't correspond to the private sector data. Then that's a big red flag, in fact, that maybe Washington is lying. But that rarely happens, including now. You're not seeing this vast discrepancy between the public and the private data. Now, I know the conspiracy-minded of you are saying, well, the private sector's in on it as well. But here's the thing. They can't be in on it because at some point the chickens come home to roost with the economic data. And they get held responsible, and you can sue the private sector companies. And it's not happening. In China, there is no private sector data to match what the government says. So you have to take the government's word for it, and no one takes the government's word for it. And what's happening here is China is destabilizing, and it's becoming more dangerous. They're harassing Philippine shippers. They harassed the Philippines Navy this week. They're harassing our Navy. Xi Jinping needs a way to get the country on a nationalist fervor, and a war is coming, probably an invasion of Taiwan, as that economy collapses and society with it. Now, Some of you are worried about your business collapsing because you can't stay online because your computers are old or your employees don't know how to use them or they have problems. Vision computers can save you a lot of heartache, a lot of time, a lot of lost downtime. They can keep your computers going. They can keep you all going. If you don't have computers from Vision Computers, for just $179 a year, they'll take over your support as well. So you don't have to have bought your computers from Vision Computers to get their quality 5-star service. 3,500 5-star reviews. That's how good they are. VisionComputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. They can keep you online, keep your employees online, so your employees can be experts in their field, not experts at keeping their computer going. VisionComputers.com, 404-COMPUTE. But hey, listen, they also build computers, laptops, desktops. They do a really, really good job building computers, PCs, desktops, laptops, gaming PCs. My son's got one from them. I know their service and their quality firsthand. I can vouch for it. They are that good. And they can help any one of you listening or any business listening nationwide. They can be your IT department and your computer builders. VisionComputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. Delighted to have you. I got to play you this audio. This is, nope. Nah, they've taken it down. Doggone it. I'm going to have to find this. So on Monday, the Supreme Court unanimously sided with Trump, said he can't be kicked off the ballot in Colorado, but also Maine, Illinois, several others have done it. There was an absolute media meltdown. You know, here's the problem is they have put on TV, they've put all of these talking heads, these commentators on TV to say that it was a no-brainer, that it was obvious, that of course Donald Trump was disqualified under the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment, and the Supreme Court unanimously rejects it. The total meltdown from these people, one of the biggest problems, it's not the biggest problem, but it is one of the biggest problems we have today, is the complete lack of humility by people in the press and those they put on television, to never be able to analyze why they were wrong, to never say, oops, my bad, I was wrong. None of them are willing to do it. It's remarkable to me. It really is remarkable to me that you rarely, I may be the only one who I come on this program at least once a week and say, hey guys, got something wrong, got to correct it. You don't hear that in television. It's remarkable to me. It is genuinely remarkable to me that you don't hear this sort of stuff, that you don't, and they're angry with the Supreme Court. They're angry, not because they got it wrong, but because they made them look like fools. I think it was the right position. But I've got friends of mine who are embarrassing themselves about this. The Supreme Court got it right. You cannot let a state control who can or cannot be president of the United States unilaterally without a Democratic vote. The meltdown from the media over this is just completely based on their utter lack of humility.